Well, hey there, everybody. How's it going today? My name is Carpo. I'm an American. As you can see, I have a flag behind me. I should start off by addressing that. It was not just some random flag. This was my father's flag that I was given at his funeral. He was a Vietnam vet. And I actually used to have my grandfather's flag, which he was a World War II vet. And both of them, well, the first one burned up, but this one I managed to actually hang on to. We had a house fire, and it burned up my whole bedroom, which was out in the garage, and I lost basically everything I owned at the time. My tapes, my music collection, all the different things I had. Journals, art. And like a lot of people, I've been through a lot of shit in my life. We've had a couple of fires. We've had a couple of, issues with health. We've had a couple issues with not being able to pay bills. The same things that most families have, And we bought this house maybe in 2003 or 4, I think. And we had some tough times. But here we are, 16 years later, still moving forward. And for about 10 of those years, I've had a YouTube channel where I've sat and talked about just about everything. And sometimes when I sit back and I look at what I've, the videos I've made, how far I've come, when I go back and look at some of my first videos, I just cringe sometimes. Think, oh man, why do I even leave these up? But it's part of who I am. It's part of my growth, And of all the time I've had my YouTube account, it's funny, I've had Facebook here and there, and I deleted it a while back because it was too toxic. But I just today, for the first time, I actually created a Twitter account. I thought, 160 characters is pretty limited, but I have a lot of words that I like to express myself with. So the Twitter account is the same. It's Carpo719, if you're interested in that. But I don't do it for the reasons a lot of people do. As much as I'd love to make a living off of speaking, talking, sharing ideas, I'm also realistic. I have to work. I have to do other things on the side. I refuse to sponsor products I don't care about, or talk about Dollar Shave Club, or some kind of stupid VPN. I mean, everybody knows the same old commercials that you see consistently through YouTube. And I'm amazed that I've even stuck with YouTube through all the bullshit and censorship that I've had personally. The way that I'm not even able to talk about kratom anymore. Can't even have my cannabis plants. Everything gets pushed to the back or censored, or I've posted enough videos and comments and community posts to realize that certain subjects are not put out for the public, that are not put on any main platform. We're in a cancel culture beyond anything that people realize that's going on. But I don't want to get into that. I want this to be a more somewhat positive outlook on life. I wanted to give you 3 reasons not to believe me or anything I say. And this is somewhat sarcastic, but realistic too. This could apply to anyone you're listening to. Because it seems that today we are willing to believe anything that suits our fancy. So the first reason not to believe me is that my experiences are my own, and nobody else has had them. They are unique to me. My individual feelings and ideas about those experiences are unique. And because of this, it's not right or wrong. It's that each person thinks differently. Number 2 is that I have my own cognitive bias based on what I expect in life, what I would like to see as my ideal society, and the upbringing that I've had. And number 3 is you don't know me. Now I know a lot of subscribers think they know me. A lot of people have said, "Oh, this and this and this about my life." I'd say, well over half of the things I think, and well over half of the subjects in my life, I don't ever share with the internet. This becomes tough because there are certain things I just won't talk about, not because I'm afraid of a response or a controversy, but because I have other reasons. Let's talk about firearms for a moment. You'll never hear me talk about weapons. You'll never hear me talk about self-defense, except for just now. Why? Well, I would rather have people think that I'm ignorant of weapons, ignorant of guns, that I've never gone shooting, than to tell them that I was a crack shot at 9 years old with a .303 British rifle, that I know how to use firearms and that I know how to defend myself, and that I have absolutely no fear of, anybody coming to fuck with me or my family. Now, this is different from the image that I put off because I don't like to talk about guns, because I don't see them as a... I had a discussion the other day with somebody who's like, well, they had the misunderstanding that I didn't support firearms. And I said, no, I just don't see carrying them when I'm walking through the city. I have never had an issue. So be it if that's what you want to do. That wasn't my thing. My thing is I had friends when I was younger who got carry permits. And after a point, they realized I don't need to carry a 9mm everywhere I go. It's uncomfortable, it's pointless, and I haven't saved anybody's life. There's a superhero mentality to it sometimes, but I don't want that to be offensive. I want to say that we all, a lot of men especially, feel that desire to protect themselves and their community, and that's totally respectable, totally fine. But there's a difference between obsession. So I have different takes on these things, but to go back to my 3 reasons not to trust me, like I said, my experiences are my own. I have cognitive bias like the rest of you, and you don't know me. If that's the case for all people, then why do we trust musicians and their opinion on life? Why do we trust artists and what they have to say about the world? Why do we trust movie stars, some of the worst people to give opinions on public policy? It's the reason why people say, well, why do we give a shit what Hollywood thinks? We don't. I mean, yeah, I like movies. I, respect all people, but I don't really care what a particular movie star says about what's going on in the world any more than I care about what a particular NBA star thinks about the world. I guess that's one of the things, is the idea that sports stars know anything about anything. I'll leave you with that for 1 second. I heard my kid calling. What do you need, Soy? Soy. Well, whatever. That's real life, yo. I don't know where he went. He took off. I heard a dad. Or I thought I heard a dad. The answer to the question, why do we trust politicians? Why do we trust movie stars? Why do we trust Hollywood? Because success. It's a very simple answer. Because success. We as a society equate money and fame with awareness. Now I want you to sit with that for a minute and really think about it. The amount of energy it takes to make money and to become famous and to buy into that bullshit, whether it be politics, movie stars, musicians, anything else, makes it very difficult to have the extra time to study philosophy, to sit with your thoughts, to become a thinking human, if you will. And I say this not to demean any of these arts. It's to say that I know how much time it takes to learn, okay? I understand how long it takes, not just to read about things, because this is I wanted to make a video just about this, that there's a certain period where you learn something, and then a period where you want to share it, and then you have to sit back for a minute and process it in your mind, and then share it, so you can really think through the details. It's like sleeping on it, right? Well, if you wait too long, you forget the details of the subject. So there is a period of awareness where you learn something, you process it, and then you share it. If you don't have time to sit with your thoughts, then you can't ever process it properly. So that's my way of saying, do you really think that a politician who every single day gets up and scrambles to try to figure out how to get these laws passed or this done, do you think they have time to sit for hours a day and read books and learn? Like, it's not like we're ever educated enough to understand. And I'm not talking about numbers and, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I'm talking about learning about what's going on in the world, learning about the needs of the people, which are constantly changing. Not the needs as much as the awareness of what people really want. We've seen some crazy shit happen in this last year that has blown people's minds. They said, I had no idea, or I had no idea that people felt this way or this way. And how can there be so many people that think this and this? It's the way it is. It doesn't matter why. The question is, how do we reconcile it? How do we interact with all the people? This country, the United States, has a long history of unrest. What's happening this year is nothing new. This shit happened in 1968. There was a major flu pandemic in 1968. And also, that was the same year that MLK was shot, and that there were major riots around the country. And somebody pointed out today, they said, why is it that today we have so many more protesters in the streets, but so much less destruction? Because in today's generation, they think pulling a few statues over is full-blown, like, rioting. The truth is, if you look back to the Watts riots and look at what really happened back in the 60s, it was nasty. Much worse than anything that's ever happened today. The reason, and somebody pointed out, was leadership. There are people, regardless of the people who are ignoring the leadership, there are people who are trying to organize people to be peaceful and reasonable and rational, and some won't. And the same thing happens in politics. Some people will follow what the people want, and others will completely do what they want. And a failure of leadership is how we got to where we are right now. Is it worth getting upset about? Is the main point I wanted to ask. I've decided to kind of opt out of politics for most of my YouTube, my time posting things on YouTube. And don't expect me to talk about politics directly. But once in a while, when something's going on that I feel is important to address, of course I have to point it out. There's nothing more annoying than when somebody says, oh, you shouldn't talk about politics. And I'm like, basically what you're saying is you don't want to hear what I have to say. Then don't listen. I don't care. If I feel that people are being slighted or wronged, or the system is embarrassingly failing, then of course I'm going to point those things out. And unfortunately, it's usually a leader that leads people. The president is the Pied Piper right now. And, I can't help but point that out. I mean, I can't be in denial of what I see blatantly in front of me. And, so what I wanted to address, and somebody pointed this out earlier, somebody said it's not Trump's fault all this shit's happening, and I totally agree. So don't think that just because I don't like Trump, I think it's all his fault of what's going on. I'm not an idiot. Anxiety builds over generations. Trump is nothing more than a symptom of a ongoing situation. And it's unfortunate that he has such a base that will defend him no matter what, because I actually think it's great to have a guy who speaks his mind. It's unfortunate that I don't trust his mind, if that makes sense. I like a person who says it like it is, only if it's how it is. And so each person's going to have their own opinion on that. And it's really sad that we've come to a point where just me bringing up Trump in this video will turn people off and they will get upset about it. I'm sorry if you're that sensitive that you can't even talk about it, that you're offended by even bringing up points, then really the discussions can't go anywhere, We have to start out on a basic premise that people are people. And this comes full circle to what I was saying at the beginning. Don't trust me because you don't know me. You have to extend that to politicians, musicians, artists, anybody who you think is telling you the truth. And say, why do I trust this person? And what have they done for me? How can I know for sure that they care about my needs and that they're not just giving me propaganda? And propaganda is such an easy tool to use on people. Right now, and the way I see it is it's easy to think that we're doing great, but we have a major health crisis. We have a major economic crisis, and not just because of COVID-19. I'm not seeing neither one of those. The health crisis goes way back to the failed healthcare system that we're all well aware that the U.S. healthcare system is a complete failure. For those who aren't aware and think that we're still the greatest nation, this may be true in some regards and respects, depending on where you live. But we are 27th in the nations for healthcare and education. So my question was, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we aren't funding healthcare or education sufficiently to be number one when we talk about being a number one nation? And long ago I knew we weren't number one. I mean, maybe in my early days I was really into conspiracies, and I learned about MK Ultra and all the mind control programs and the CIA's experiments. I was pretty taken back by how fucked up our own government was in this country. And that's when I started to understand how important it is, let's talk about the Second Amendment, having weapons. People on the left who say, oh, we need to get rid of all these weapons, and people say on the right who say we need to keep all the weapons. And the discussions I've had with the people on the right who are major weapons fanatics would be, do you think you should be able to buy a nuclear weapon? And they'd say, no, of course not. I say, well, do you think you should be able to buy an atomic weapon? Or let's say a lesser bomb. They say, well, no. Do you think you should be able to buy a bazooka? And they'd say, no, of course not. Well, yeah. And then we get into kind of the categories of what's legitimate. Most people don't even realize you can buy a flamethrower legally online. You can order a flamethrower, have it delivered to your home. And you should be able to, because the issue was never weapons. The issue was never about whether we should get rid of guns. And I really don't want to bring this up, but it's important because people are so focused on guns as the problem of mass shootings. But we don't look at the mental health aspect or the issue of, and what's sad is that when I said mass shootings, you realize what that means. The YouTube algorithm will instantly select my video for demonetization. Thank God I don't give a shit, because I don't make money off of AdSense. And that will give me a moment to toot my own horn and say, you can support me on Patreon for $1 a month. And hey, I used to be embarrassed to mention that, but I'm not anymore. People have said, you've put in so many videos and so many hours of talking to people. There's nothing wrong with mentioning that, because a lot of channels do make their money off ads. The reason I bring that up it wasn't to talk about Patreon, but to say that a lot of YouTube channels refuse to talk about controversial subjects not because they're afraid of the feedback, but because they're afraid of being demonetized. That is where we're living right now. And this isn't just YouTube channels. This is the mainstream media, the alternative media. Everybody is catering to bullshit. CNN, NBC, Fox, all of these main stations are just completely catering to their advertisers. I'll be honest, I scan Breitbart and a bunch of the right-wing journals and articles. One thing I found about Breitbart is that they are nothing but a giant advertisement cesspool. Most of the ads I see on there are for body armor, tough guy stuff, ammo. It's pretty transparent when you really go. If you go from a cleared browser with no cookies, and you go and you look at every single site and look at the type of ads that you get, you realize what a goddamn propaganda machine people are believing. Because when you see all of them as failures, when you can laugh at CNN, when you can also laugh at Fox, then you feel very fucking lonely. Let me just put it that way. It is very lonely, because every time I mention something about the right wing, somebody says, oh, you guys and your CNN. It's like, no, dude, I don't watch CNN. I don't go to left-wing liberal media. When people do ask where I get my information, I say many different sources, scientific journals. But if I'm going to click headlines, I go to AP. Associated Press. They don't cover everything either. But let me say, you don't ever hear people talk bad about AP. They talk bad about CNN, about Fox, about NBC, ABC, but people don't talk shit about AP, because the articles are indisputable for the most part. You might run across a headline that's not quite complete, but I have never, and I've been scanning AP for years, I do not see anything that turns out to be fake news. And I just want to put that out there because it's amazing how many people don't realize Associated Press is an actual website you can go to. And if you don't know this, that's where CNN and Fox, NBC, ABC, Breitbart, every single one of them, down to Alex Jones, gets their media is from AP. They all copy Associated Press, which has thousands of journalists around the world covering things. And you can confirm it with posts by individuals through Facebook, through Twitter, through other things. So I just wanted to put that out there because, when people say you don't know what to believe, no, you don't. But AP is probably one of the most trusted sources. So to get back to where I was saying, we have a health crisis at the same time as an economic crisis that started in 2008, which never went away, when we bailed out all the banks and gave bonuses to all the CEOs. And then we have this fact that leadership is difficult. In other words, it's hard to lead, and I respect that. When people say, hey man, it's hard to be president, hey, I can see that. But I also say, well, if you spend all day tweeting and if you spend all day complaining, you're not going to get anything done. And that's why it's hard for me to see the presidential office for what it is and say, what's the alternative this year? Joe Biden. I mean, just like, I can't even believe that this is the choice that the DNC, has given Joe Biden, the guy who can't even make a commercial without messing up. What did he say? It was like, I've watched it like 4 times. It says something like, hello everyone, I'm coming direct to you for ask a favor. That's what it was. I'm coming direct to you for ask a favor. Not to ask a favor. And they actually took that cut and they posted it. My thought is they planned that. They wanted him to slip up. They wanted him to look stupid because they thought it'll give you this impression that it's this good old boy president that's doing his best. I just don't know what to think anymore. The whole thing is a show. It's just a sham. I go back to 2016 and I think of Hillary Clinton and just how appalling she is. No interest in her at all. And how the choices were so shitty back then. And then today it's just as bad. I know people will bring up, remember, oh, you supported Bernie Sanders. Look, I never loved all of Bernie's plans, but I said he's the best option at this point for change, to get something extreme the other direction, to see if it works. Because we've tried everything. And going back to the status quo and supporting corporations is just not the answer. And I thought, here's one guy who can't be bought off. So that was my reasoning. But they're still old white men. What do you do? I'd like to say that we can't give up on society. We can't give up on our nation. But turning off the news does not solve the problem. I don't know how many times I've read comments where people say, turn off the news, or turn off CNN, or turn this off. And I say, you can turn off the news. But if you turn off information, if you turn off all sources of info, then what you're getting is propaganda at best. And that means that you'll end up falling for some of these guys in their basement on YouTube channels saying they know what the truth is. Anybody who puts truth in the name of their channel or uses a capital T truth in their videos to say this is what's true, it makes me suspicious. Doesn't mean they're wrong, it just means it makes me suspicious, because if you turn off the media, then you turn off any liability for the information that's given. And let me explain that. A YouTube channel where somebody says something that you disagree with, you can post a comment and say, hey, this is bullshit, this is a lie. And they don't have to respond, they can delete your comment and you have no recourse. When one news channel, a biased news channel, makes a fake claim like CNN, then Fox will instantly be trying to cross-check them and fact-check them, all right? Now follow me here. Fox, on the other hand, will say something and CNN will try to fact-check them. This is a good thing. Because if you really think about it, back in the day before the Fairness Doctrine was eliminated, which was in the 80s, the Fairness Doctrine said you should give equal time on a news channel to both sides. And of course this had to change with modern day and more and more channels. People want to watch news that relates to what they believe. That's understandable, but that cross-checking is what keeps reality going. It's what keeps us understanding. If somebody makes a claim, you just have to go to the other side and say, what are they saying? And somewhere falling in the middle is places like Snopes, where, I've even said, let's say, quoting Wikipedia or Snopes, there will always be people who will say, oh, they're both bullshit. But Wikipedia and Snopes are constantly adjusting with the truth, whereas a lot of sites will never admit that they were wrong. So you could probably learn more by checking Snopes for things that you have heard than anywhere else. You might not always be 100%, but you're definitely going to be within that realm. What I've found is people don't want to. They don't want to admit they're wrong. They don't want to admit that what they believe might not be the truth. And I would say that that's a very, very difficult thing to overcome. Because when it comes down to our egos, when we start to identify with ideas, it means that if somebody says, hey, what you believe isn't true, let's say. And let's take the extreme religion. A person is a Christian, another person's a Muslim. Perhaps they're friends, they get along. The minute you try to convert another person, they're going to take that offensively because they have built a connection to that belief system. You're basically questioning their integrity by questioning their beliefs. Now, what I've found, and this is sad but true, sometimes when I'm having discussions with people about a subject, whether it be a president, a policy, an idea about how to live life, sometimes when people don't agree, instead of saying, well, I don't agree, they say, they're offended. I've had people tell me that they're offended when I say something bad about Trump, when I say something bad about religion, when I say something bad about a particular belief system, anything, whatever it might be. Honestly, politics and religion are the two big ones, but people get very personally offended, and that's something we should try to overcome. I say that as a note that in my life, like South Park, Family Guy, like say South Park has poked fun at every group. The only one group that I've ever been slightly maybe taken like as if that one's pointed as me is when they like tease stoners, let's say. But I agree with them. Yeah, you smoke too much weed, you become like this. They've been wrong on a lot of things, but it's keeping us honest, in other words. The extremely controversial shows like that poke at all the sides, they keep people honest by saying, okay, I realize that our group is a little overbearing and we think that this is true. And it's taken me a few years to admit that that's how liberals are. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what I believe, I'd say I'm a liberal. Today I don't, because I see that the extreme left wing has taken it to the point where we have cancel culture, where we are shaming people for what they say, where comedians can't even say what they feel, even if it's a joke. And it's just extreme. And then we've gotten to the world where emotions are seen as a weakness. How many people have you talked to who think that, talk about being a snowflake? I mean, I've mentioned that word as a half joke. Really, snowflake is about sensitivity, but not emotion. Emotion is different. It's not a weakness. Emotion is how we react to things. But we've got to know the difference between having an emotion to something and reacting to something because of our preconceived notions about truth, if that makes sense. The world is a stage. A lot of people would like to believe that every single thing is planned and set up and that, we don't know anyway, why try? But there are some things that actually happen. You can quote me on that. Carpo, 2020. Some things actually happen. All we can do is raise our kids the best we can, right? And raise ourselves the best we can. And protect our family. Because God damn it, that's all that really matters. Protect our family and our friends. But we can extend that to our neighborhood, right? We have neighborhood watch groups. We have community watch groups. We have communities. And by definition, are communes in a way, if you think about it. Community is taking care of each other. And we have been hoodwinked, duped into thinking that we're going to win by trying to get one over on other people. that capitalism means dominating others, not just doing well for ourselves. And we are taught to play the game. So all I can say on that note is play the game as best you can. Don't let it play you. And sometimes we will be insecure, and sometimes we'll be strong. And being a human is a very complicated endeavor, but we can simplify it by opting out of some of the bullshit. Peace out. My camera is running out of time. Go figure, right? Just want to say again, thanks to my patrons, thanks to my subs, and don't forget to check out my Twitter account for what it's worth. You might learn something new. Or not.